Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Local Marketing Beat, brought to you by Overall, the only location marketing platform that connects your digital presence to revenue. And today we're joined by industry legend Greg Sterling. He is analyst and co-founder of Near Media, and we're actually talking into this evolving relationship between AI and search and how it's reshaping the consumer journey, because we all know it's changing and it's drastically changing. It has changed. We're on today, and I believe that things are about to change even more. So we're talking anywhere from ChatGPT and Gemini all the way to Google's AI overviews and what really is the future of local discovery. So Greg is going to share some exclusive insights from his latest U.S. consumer research. He's been studying consumer behavior since 1999, which is why I thought he was a perfect guest for this topic. So what's the beat on Local Marketing Street this month? Let's get into it, Greg. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Christian, for having me. And as some people listening to this, but many people won't know, I used to be a colleague at Uberall for a number of years back in the pre-COVID and COVID era, which we're still sort of feeling the lingering effects of. But it's great to be back on with you and to talk about these issues. Obviously, everybody is very caught up in AI and the disruptive impact of AI and all the shiny new object stuff. But I think, you know, the reality that we're all dealing with is complex and uncertain and definitely evolving quickly as these products change, but certain things are stable, and we can talk about those.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you were on episode number 3, so that was exactly 2 years ago. I went back and watched it this morning, and I saw this very young Christian Hustle. Yeah.
What do we talk about? What do we talk about?
We actually talked about Google SGE. As you recall, that's what they called it when the beta came out.
Search generative experience, right?
Yeah, which is a very long word, very complicated to say. I didn't think it was going to stick. Luckily, it did not, right? It became Google AI Overviews. But we were talking about our theories, our expectations, like how local discovery is going to change. And then on our side, how are we going to optimize for these things? These were theories, right? And I remember we closed up and we say, hey, we'll have to do this again once all these things settle. Right, as
here we are.
2 years in, nothing has settled. It just got more dramatic changes as we've seen. But why don't we start there on some of these strategic shifts that you've seen on the consumer side? What do you think are the biggest shifts that you've seen in your research and all the things that you do at Near Media?
Well, so I do, just to clarify, I do two things. I'm a co-founder of Near Media, which is a program that's focused on user research and local search and the search marketplace. And then I have another program, which is called Dialogue, localdialogue.com, which is about AI specifically. But these things kind of cross-pollinate. And at Dialogue, we do research on small business behavior, consumers, agencies, franchises, and how they're responding to what's going on in the market. So what we're seeing, we've done 2 consumer surveys, one in November and one in June, very recently. And we have seen some interesting things going on. So at a high level, people really like AI. They really like ChatGPT and some of the other similar experiences, Gemini, Claude. They like the conversational user experience. They like the ability to ask follow-up questions. They trust the information for the most part. And they really like that user experience. That does not mean that they have abandoned Google, or they uniformly intend to. A lot of the early conversation when ChatGPT launched was, is this going to destroy Google in 2 years? And obviously that hasn't happened. That hasn't happened. But Google has obviously really radically changed its product in response to ChatGPT in particular. So we've got Google AI overviews that you mentioned. We've got AI mode now, which is more like ChatGPT. And they also made a whole bunch of changes earlier in the kind of content that they were showcasing. For example, Reddit and forums are now much more prominent than they used to be. And that's a response to people going to TikTok and Instagram to get information that they perceive to be more authentic. So what we've seen in these surveys is that people like AI. They use it for certain things and not other things. We asked a question about, in these different categories, legal, healthcare, shopping, product research, local search, about 12 or 13 categories. Do you think ChatGPT or Google delivers a better experience? And it was about, I mean, the numbers were different by category, but
Right.
basically it was about 2/3 preferred Google or picked Google, and about
Interesting.
one third picked
Okay.
ChatGPT, which is a pretty substantial number. So these are people
Yeah.
saying that they prefer and think ChatGPT is doing a better job than Google. In June, that was November data. In June, just a couple of weeks ago, what we found is that all of the ChatGPT numbers had grown. So the number of
Mm,
people saying that AI, ChatGPT in particular, is going to provide a better experience across these different categories had grown, except for two, news and local search, which was really interesting.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a whole bunch of other stuff that I can talk about. One of the more interesting findings was 2/3 of the audience had done local searches, look for local
Hmm.
business information on ChatGPT or their preferred AI, whether it's Gemini or Grok or Claude, Meta. But um, that was not a very frequent use case. So a lot of people had done it, but
Interesting. Yeah.
they didn't do it that often. So we asked them, what are the most common use cases? What are the most frequent use cases? And local search was way down at the bottom out of like 18 choices. A lot of people had done it, but they're not having great experiences.
Yeah.
So what they do after they do a local search on AI is that they then go to Google. So they
Hmm.
find, they do a bunch of research or they get the information that they need, and then they go to Google to get reviews, directions, contact information, or, to do follow-up searches. So that suggests, and I'll stop in a minute here, that suggests it's kind of a microcosm for the
Hmm.
relationship between these things. So people are doing certain kinds of things, top of funnel, mid funnel searches on AI. And then in many cases, they're going to Google for the last mile or for additional information that they're not getting from AI or they're not having a great experience on AI. And there's a kind of complementary use case.
And that's the exactly what I was gonna say, because it feels like, when you do a local search, I wish it was better, right? I wish I could see the not just the sources, but like for example, it pulls in some reviews, and I don't know exactly where the reviews from, how much can I trust them, right? So all of this ambiguity and just it feels like a magic box. It's like where are you getting all this info that you're just compiling from the world and putting it all together, that as a consumer I still cannot trust 100%, so I got to go to Google. One third, right, like 33%, seems like a high number to me, right? Like,
Right.
and even in the research that overall did, it was
It
four
was like
different
20,
countries.
was
Yeah,
20,
20%.
yeah, it was
20%.
20 something percent.
And
Right.
I mean, we talked about the episode that we recorded 2 years ago. That was not a thing, right? It was zero because it was not even
Right.
available. So do you think there's an actual threat to the way that a consumer will eventually just use AI for, from AI prompt to visit a physical location?
I don't think we're going to see a kind of binary or
Okay.
black and white situation where it's like, some people of course will use AI for the majority of their research,
Yeah.
and some people will continue to use Google for most of it. But I think there's going to be a spectrum in the middle of people using it to varying degrees and for different things. I
Yeah.
mean, one of the interesting findings from the two surveys was that in November, we asked the same question, but we asked in November, we said, do you think search and AI are interchangeable, more or less the same, and can be used interchangeably, or are they different? And do you use them differently? Or are you not sure? And 49% of people in November said they're pretty much the same and we kind of use them the same. And that's
Hmm.
about half the audience, which was interesting, which suggests vulnerability for Google as people sort of move to AI. But what we found when we segmented or when we looked at the heavy users, people who used AI multiple times a day, those people were more inclined to say that they're different. The tools are different and they use them differently. And what we found in June is that the number of people who said Google and AI are the same was lower. So the more people had moved into their different and I use them differently category,
Interesting.
even as more people are moving from casual AI use to more frequent AI use. So we had more people moving from weekly use, fewer people in the weekly use bucket, and more in the daily and multiple times a day bucket. So this all indicates that people will be using AI, at least for the foreseeable future, for a certain set of use cases, which may impact Google, but then they also use Google for other things, as I sort of suggested in the local example. One of the second most common use case for AI that we found, first one was information, sort of general research and information lookups. And then number two was product research and comparisons, which is
Yeah,
pretty
I can see that.
interesting.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, I've got these two products. Can you compare them? Recently, I'm looking for an area rug for my living room, and
Mm-hmm.
I found one at West Elm that I like a lot, but I was looking for like cheaper alternatives. And I
Right.
found the same rug, the same design on Amazon, and I was trying
Oh,
to determine what the differences were. Was this the same rug? In fact, it was
yeah.
about half price, or is this a kind of knockoff that's cheaper quality? And so I
Right.
put both URLs in, and I was doing all these comparisons and asking all these questions. Since people are doing that kind of thing, but they still are using Google. And the question is, I'm sorry. The question is, how much search will migrate? I've got like multiple things going on in my brain simultaneously. How much of what you used to do on Google will migrate over to AI? And
Yeah.
the answer is some of it, right? I mean, it's AI for certain kinds of things is a much, much more efficient tool than Google is. If you're trying to get a general question answered, or, figure out some some information, like, I'm buying an EV, and I'm buying a used EV because I'm getting into the TMI zone. But my wife was driving our car. We had a Chevy Bolt,
Okay.
2019 Chevy Bolt. My
Nice.
wife parked it at her work, and yeah, I love that car. She parked it at her work, and it got hit by a truck when it was
Oh,
parked and totaled. Right, the frame was ruined. So now we're in the market to replace it, and I
right.
got, and I'm looking to see if I can get the tax credit that's
Mhm.
available.
Yeah.
And I got it the last time because frankly I didn't make enough money to just be unqualified. But anyway, so I got the credit, and now I can't get it again, which I thought I could. So I asked ChatGPT about this. I said, can I get the used credit? Can I get the new credit if I buy a new car? And it answered all those questions. Trying to get that,
Right.
I know I digressed and gave you TMI, but trying to get that kind of information off of Google is just really problematic. AI is so much more efficient for certain kinds of things, but then it has information gaps, or it doesn't have complete information. And so
Yeah.
you want to go to Google for certain kinds of things. And local is an area in particular where Google has a dramatic competitive advantage because of all its data, its local guides, its local graph, maps, and the depth of information, reviews. So that's going to remain a very kind of high intensity use case for a lot of people, even if they're using ChatGPT to get other kinds of information.
I think that I'm curious to hear your thoughts, but as these AI tools, I don't want to call them agents. I want to be careful and say these AI platforms where you
Right.
can prompt and search, and you'll see why I don't want to call it an agent. But I was talking to a very large furniture retailer at SMX when I was in Boston a couple of weeks ago, and we were just throwing theories. And I told her, what if one day I'm able to just say, I'm redoing my living room and I want this
Right.
mid-century concept. What
Right.
are the rugs or couches you recommend? And then it's not just gonna recommend me, but I can click buy now, right? That's it, right? As I don't have to go anywhere else. This thing is gonna place the order for me. So
That assumes that you don't want to see the thing that you're buying in
yeah,
person.
yeah. And maybe furniture might not be the best idea, right? But
Yeah, but it's an illustration of one scenario for
yeah,
the future, for sure.
yeah. It's like we're not there. Yeah, I understand. You still need to do that additional search and go compare or do your due diligence, even especially in the vehicle, aspect.
Right.
But could some industries slowly get there, right? I love the feature that Google Business Profile released recently, where they can actually submit a phone call to see if they're available and see
Right.
what's the wait time. Like that's awesome, right? As a consumer, it's like, oh, I
It's
don't even
it's
have to
awesome in
call.
theory. It's awesome
Yeah.
in theory, but it's often these things don't work well in practice. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Right? It's a sort of request for quote kind of capability, or
Yeah,
or
yeah,
appointment kind of thing. But will it actually, give you, will it actually work? I think that remains to be seen. But
so
what you're talking about is the idea of agents going out, doing research,
right.
bringing you choices, and then even transacting on your behalf if you've already authorized it to do so.
Yeah. And I think that brings the next question, which is how can brands start getting ready for this, right? Because I think that's where every episode we have been doing, it always ends there, right? From what I've seen, it's a lot
Right.
of data. Like it's more than ever, the more data that's available, the more the AI's platforms are going to know about you. But is there anything else that you can think of that you've seen from your research or heard or anything like that on how does these brands can get ready and ahead of this, because I think that's the biggest challenge right now.
Yeah, well, that's a podcast in itself. But at the
Yeah.
highest At the highest level, the importance of building a strong brand and a loyal audience has never been greater. It's hard to get visibility on Google, just regular Google organic results. And these AI tools kind of reduce information as you presented it to a kind of commodity. Here's one supplier, here's another supplier. There
Right.
might be multiple suppliers that are equally acceptable to me, and I have criteria, and the one that meets it is going to get my business. And AI, Google had the tendency to flatten brands,
Hmm.
and AI risks doing that even more, turning your content, your information, your inventory into a kind of commodity. Now that's not
Yeah.
going to be true in every case. So you really need to boost your brand. At the most basic level, you need to deliver a great customer experience, a great product, a great service, a great experience. That's just business 101, right? People get
Right.
all sort of deer in the headlights with all the technology, and they lose sight of these business fundamentals, which are really essential. If assuming you're doing that, you need to use channels other than Google to build your brand. Social media, maybe traditional media in some cases, newsletters or email marketing for your customers. I mean, it's going to depend on who your customers are, their
Yeah.
frequency, and a bunch of other stuff. But you need to really understand where your customers are. How are your customers finding you? How are they discovering you? What are the things that they're using? Are they using Instagram? Are they using TikTok? Are they using, TripAdvisor? Are they using Google? It's always Google, and it's never just Google. So you need to
Right.
get a full sense of the customer journey as much as possible, and where are your customers. And that's going to vary by demographics and by your product. And then you need to really strengthen that brand and do what you can to build loyalty so people come directly to you, and there are things about what you do that are unduplicated by others. So you remove this sort of commodity problem.
Mm.
And there are things that are inherently commodities, certain kinds of objects. Furniture is a commodity, but if you can build an experience around that, great service, helpful website, so on and so on, so forth, then that helps. Beyond that, there's a bunch of optimizations, and we probably don't have time to get into all of that. And I'm also not a technical SEO expert, but if you're a franchisor, you're somebody with multiple stores, a multi-location brand, you have to fully build out. I mean, the people that are listening to this probably understand a lot of this. Claim and fully build out your Google business profile.
Hmm.
Now also Bing Places, because
Yeah.
ChatGPT
Exactly.
uses that information.
Yep.
Reviews are as important or more important than they've ever been. Google reviews are really important, but first party reviews on your website are also important and starting to show up in ChatGPT. And there may be key verticals depending on your industry where there are other sites. If you're in
Hmm.
hospitality, or, if you're a hotel, TripAdvisor is really important. Certain other sites are really important. Eater may be important if you're a restaurant. So you need to really understand, where are those other places that people look, and what are those directories and other sites that are showing up, whether it's in Google or ChatGPT or another AI. And you can do some searches in your category to get some visibility on that. You need to be in those places as well. So
Absolutely.
it's a mix of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So Google Business Profiles, Bing Places, reviews in key sites, and presence in certain key vertical directories where they're obviously being drawn upon by a ChatGPT or used by Google. And Yelp has kind of renewed importance, I think. Yelp is getting some love in AI mode
Hmm.
and in ChatGPT. So if you do a local search on ChatGPT for best fill in the blank restaurant, you'll often see Yelp show up there. And AI
Interesting.
mode also
Yeah.
shows Yelp with regularity. That's a totally minority use case right now, but it may grow over time.
Yeah, but it's a great point to build the brand, because especially, some verticals are heavily searching, or consumers are heavily using TikTok to find restaurants, things to do, travel, right? Like, we're
Exactly.
planning a summer travel later this fall, or actually fall travel, with some friends, and all they're doing is just looking for reels and TikToks, right? Instead of reading articles, instead of watching full 30-minute videos, which is what I
Or instead
usually
of
would do.
right.
So,
Or the and
it depends.
YouTube is another important resource depending on
Yeah.
who you are. Yes, you're totally right, and I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's all
My
right.
Yeah, my daughter, I have a 26-year-old daughter, and she is very, very heavily invested in TikTok, and
Mhm.
she's taking a trip with her sister, my other daughter, this summer, and a lot of the travel planning is happening through TikTok.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I'm sort of supporting them in some ways. I'm looking at YouTube as much as
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at anything
Yeah,
else. And so this really goes back to understanding who your customer is and
exactly.
what they're doing. So it used to be the case. One of the data points that we got from these surveys is we asked people, where do you look online for
Yeah.
information or research to help with purchase decisions for products or services? And, you know, it's 17 or 18 different places. And that's going to vary by vertical,
That's
vary by
crazy.
demographic. You know,
Yeah.
it's always going to be, I mean, think all people have to do is reflect on their own behavior. You're
Mm-hmm.
almost unless you have a brand in mind and you go directly to that website or you go to Google to look at the review, you're using multiple things because
Mm-hmm.
you want validation. You know, there was one of the research projects I did at Uber was a review fraud project, and
Oh
we did
yeah, I
the
remember
first.
that.
Right. This was 2021. We did the first comprehensive report on percentages of review fraud, the categories of review fraud on Google, Yelp, TripAdvisor, and Facebook. And what we've discovered is that people will look at multiple sites to get validation. So I see the hotel over here or the restaurant over here, and in some cases, depending on how intense the purchase is, you know, how much money you're about to spend, you're going to probably go to one or two other places and just make sure that there's consistency, right?
Yeah, and that's where the brand comes in, right? That's where your
You want
awareness
people to
or
search. You want people to search
yeah,
for you, not to search for category. People to go.
exactly. Yeah.
You don't want people to go. You know, best smoothie near me. You want people to go. You know, Juice Max or whatever. You know, I'm not a smoothie consumer, but you want people to go directly to you. More and more searches on Google. Ideally, you have a strong brand that's built on other channels, and people go to Google to search directly to navigate or search directly for your business.
Speaking about brand and brand awareness, and this related to AI, but like shorts, right? Like shorts on Instagram, on Facebook, and then TikTok, and even YouTube shorts are
Right.
crazy how wild they are, or they have gotten with their algorithm for brand awareness, right? Where you're able to even use AI to edit these very easy content, put it together, build your brand, and get thousands of views, right? Which is unheard of, because I remember when the algorithm on Facebook changed and you would post something and only 10% of your followers or your likes would see it. I mean,
Right.
that's where I think there's the opportunity for that awareness, and then shift into what you're talking about, where now they're asking for where's the location close by, right? I already know where I want to go, I just don't know where it is.
Right.
So
Exactly.
I think
Exactly.
it's very interesting. Obviously, you know, in the last 24 months since last we spoke on this, we came a long way. But now I'm curious, like, what are the next 24 months look like? Because we are seeing this segmentation. There's so many platforms. Consumer journey is crazier and more complex than ever.
Or we have more awareness of that. I mean, I think the consumer
Or
journey's
yeah,
always been kind of complicated, and word of mouth is a big factor in a lot of
it is.
high
Yeah,
consideration categories. Like we're
still
doing
is.
some research right now in legal, and the number one source of lawyer referrals is word of mouth.
100%. Yes.
Not a surprise, also a surprise. So we're seeing the complexity now more clearly, I think, than in the past.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I really want to appreciate your time for
Wait,
talking to me
wait, wait. We
today.
have to give some speculation about the next. You said what's
Oh
going to
yeah, yeah,
happen
yeah.
in the next
Okay.
24
Yeah.
months. Okay.
Let me hear your speculation, your
Well,
theory.
you know, I'm just somebody who looks at a lot of data and reads a lot of articles and talks to a lot of people. I don't necessarily have a crystal ball, but
Right.
I think, you know, we're going to see Google recently put Gemini and Chrome, and we're going
Mm-hmm.
to see more browsers include AI directly in them. And OpenAI wanted to buy Chrome if Chrome is carved out by the antitrust trial that Google's going through. Perplexity's developing a browser. So there's going to be these browsers that can do more stuff. There's one called
Mm-hmm.
GenSmart, where if you find a product, you can then open you know, a window on the right while you're still looking at the product and look for a cheaper version of
Oh.
that product, or look for a better price on that very product while
Mm-hmm.
it's still there. So that's, you know, you're going to see the agentic stuff that you talked about.
Yeah.
There's more of that stuff in store. And so, you know, the internet is a very noisy place, and
Yeah.
people are looking for tools to increase efficiency. They're looking for trusted resources. And so brand trust becomes a bigger and bigger thing,
Mm-hmm.
and direct relationships with your customers become a bigger and bigger thing. And delivering a great product or service is a bigger and bigger thing to avoid all the substitution, complexity, noise. I just think AI is a dramatic development. It may not play out exactly in the way that we're anticipating, but it is radically changing how people
It is.
discover and consume information, and that will continue to reverberate. It's just a question of how accelerated that becomes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I think it's a matter of how much and how fast. I like the agentic side of things, how it's going to make things much quicker and faster. In a couple of clicks, you're done, right? We saw that with Amazon, and it wasn't even AI. It was the buy now. It was, life changing because you don't even have to go to the shopping cart and check out. It's just one click, buy now.
But Amazon is a noisy place now, right?
It
It's like
is
I used to
so
I used
noisy.
to read reviews on Amazon, and now I don't touch reviews at all. I don't look at
No.
reviews on Amazon at all because I don't trust them.
And
Yeah.
that's another podcast episode on its own because I'm not seeing that they're doing much. So I'm hoping that it's going to be released very soon and is all going to come to us, and like these are all the AI shopping tools now. But I don't know. I don't know what you think there.
One shopping tool that is very effective that I use. After saying I don't use reviews, I have to qualify that. So they released a thing called Rufus, which is an AI assistant that allows you to ask questions about a product page, a product detail page.
Yes, I see
And
that.
I use that a lot, and it's really helpful. And I always ask questions like, what do people really like about this product? What
Yeah.
are people critical of, or what do they not like, or what are the problems? And it goes through the reviews, and it will give you a sense of what the issues are. It's imperfect, but that shows how AI becomes a layer over all kinds of content and really in some ways circumvents the direct consumption of that content. I mean, how many times, maybe you don't do this, but how many times have you gone and taken a report or taken a long article and either gone into Perplexity or ChatGPT and cut and paste it and said, what are the main points, or summarize this,
Yeah.
right?
Take off the fluff, much
Right.
faster.
You're going to get a sense of, okay, this is what it's about. Now, do I need to spend time with it, or do I move on, or whatever? You're not looking at the ads on the page. You're not
No.
scrolling.
Yeah.
You're just extracting the content and consuming it in this other place.
Right.
And that is the danger for brands and publishers, is that their content, their ads get bypassed because some other tool at an abstraction layer above them is getting all the important information. Like you're on a recipe blog, and I was on the New York Times. New York Times is not an offender here, but let's just talk about a random recipe blog. So I'm in Chrome. I use Gemini. I'm going to have to scroll through video ads and tile ads and all somebody's life story and all that. I can just say, what are the ingredients? And it'll take out all the ingredients on that page, and I can just cut and paste them into some other document.
Yeah.
And I'm done, right? The instructions and the ingredients. I'm not going to look at any of the ads, any of the video on that site. And that's the risk. That's the future, is that consumers have much more control over how content is consumed and presented. And publishers will have to figure out how do they adapt to that.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I would love to have you back in 2 years. And then we look back again and we do this whole exercise. Bottom
I hope
line
not
is
2 years. I hope not 2 years. I hope
hopefully
sooner than 2 years.
Yeah, hopefully it's sooner. We said it was going to be sooner, and then 2 years went like that. So
Yeah,
it should be sooner than that. But no, again, thank you so much for your time. I think this was fantastic way of just seeing it from your perspective. You've been since 1990 Insights and really studying how
it's a long time.
It is definitely a long time. So you've seen all these shifts and trends in the way that people, search and shop. Obviously, this is a whole different animal. But for those of our audience and subscribers that want to follow you and learn more of what you're doing, your projects, how can they connect with you, and how can they go check out what you're working on?
So I've got a bunch of email addresses, but the simplest way to get to me is just my personal email, probably greg.sterling, STERLING, GREG, @gmail.com. Or you can go to nearmedia.co, not .com, nearmedia.co, like near me with an ed with a dia on the end, or localdialogue.com. Those are my two projects. One is search, one is AI, or just reach out to me at greg.sterling@gmail.com. Be happy to share more information.
Awesome. Yeah, I highly recommend nearmedia.co. I'm actually a long-time subscriber. Love getting the emails, and I can just browse through them. It's really cool platform.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Christian, for having me. It was great to talk to you about these things, and we obviously just scratched the surface of a lot of these topics. But
yes,
your other guests will address all the things we didn't in the coming weeks.
That's right. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far into the video, go check out the Overall Academy at academy.overall.com. We have some certification and courses there. And with that, I'll see you on the next episode. Bye bye.